Skinwalkers, a creature part of Native American legends, with the ability to shapeshift into various different animals, wearing the pelts of said animals. Some say they're shamans who've delved too far into black magic, making them incapable of becoming human again. They smell of rotting flesh and appear at the sound of the whistle. Let us revisit these legends again. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's listen to 6 tales from modern people who stumble onto the grounds of these legendary creatures. An encounter with a skinwalker. So before I ever had these occurrences, I really didn't believe much in the paranormal. I've had small fascination for it, but I never really truly believed in supernatural beings until these few odd occurrences. I currently date my fiance, and she's a Native American. We'll call her S. A few years ago, when we first started dating, we kept that a secret as her mom disapproved of any of her children dating at a young age. That led to us sneaking out at night to see each other. I'd always leave my house, say 9 or 10 p.m., only to sneak back home around 1 a.m. or so. Before I continue, I should give you a layout of our area. The distance between my house and her house is not that far, really. But to get there, it's pretty damn scary. Our houses are separated by a large highway, and every night, I either take a shortcut through a dirt path road along the highway next to an old railroad, which is completely pitch black, by the way, or take a long route through my high school, which is well lit and makes the uneasy feeling of being out so late not so bad. Anyways, when we go out and talk at night, she would always jump to the topic of the paranormal, stating that she could hear the dead speak to her and various encounters with a shadow man when she was young. I just humored her and joked around by saying that one day they will come for her. As time went on, we spoke almost every night, and she told me that her brother was being attacked by a skinwalker. I almost didn't believe her, but I had a gut feeling by the way she looked at me that she was being serious. This was the time where I had introduced myself to her mother and her friend, and I'd regularly stay at her place once her mom trusted me more. One night, I noticed S burning sage around the house, and I inquired about it. This is to ward off the evil spirits and keep skinwalkers. Skinwalkers, I asked. She gave me a brief explanation of what exactly they were. S had told me that these creatures give up what made them human to become these things and act like guns for hire and stalk out their prey. They like to play games with their victims, and they only prey on people who are afraid of them. They like to initiate their game by whistling 2 extremely loud whistles and announce their presence that way. S claimed their whistling can be heard from miles away. I called bullshit and told her nothing is going to happen to them. A few nights of them doing this nightly routine, and just one night I came over and noticed S hadn't burned any sage. S always did a routine burning about around 8 to 9 p.m. I didn't mention any of that to her or her family, as the smell of sage always made my nose burn, and it made it hard to breathe. But as it was getting late, I said my goodbyes and took off for home. So when I get to the end of Esses Street, you end up at a T-bone intersection on a semi-main road to the north of the road that leads to the highway to the Southmore neighborhoods. I live northeast from her place, so naturally when I get to the intersection, I cross the street and head north. But as I got to the end of Esses neighborhood, I heard it. Two very loud, very distinct whistles cut through the night and sent chills down my spine. The hair all around my body seemingly stand on end, and I tried to make out the location of that sound. I was coming miles way down south of the road. One thought popped into my mind. She forgot to burn the sage tonight. Part of me wanted to just think it was an elaborate prank planned by S, but a deep, sinking feeling at the pit of my stomach told me it wasn't. I quickly paced back to her house, as it wasn't that far from the end of the street, and frantically knocked on their door. It had only been about 5 to 10 minutes when I left, so they weren't asleep yet. I told them about what I had heard and tell them to burn the sage just in case. I told myself even though it may not be real, it's better to be safe than sorry. I make my exit as they finish burning the sage and head back to the intersection. It was very late. I'd say about 11 p.m. or 12 at midnight on a school night, so I had to get home quickly. I walked across the main street, heading northeast, and right when I got onto the other side, I noticed him. Just across the street was an old man. Normally, I would just play it off as another pedestrian, but this guy, he just stuck out so much. It wasn't really how he looked or how he dressed, it was just how he moved that struck me as odd. An old man that looked about 60 or 70 was moving at a pace of a 20-year-old. I only took a glance at him for a few seconds, but in that time, this man just stared at me, a deep, cold stare, his eyes wide, with absolutely no expression on his face. Just a flat face, no furrowed brows, nothing. I walked slowly, keeping him just at the corner of my sight as I watched him walk down towards S's neighborhood. He kept his damn eyes on me even when I had my back to him. You'd think I was scared, but I wasn't. I didn't feel any fear. I was simply weirded out by his aura or something like that. The man didn't turn into my girlfriend's street. He just continued his fast march down south. Felt a bit of relief and brushed it off as some crazed drug addict or something. Time passes, and during that time, just some weird shit happens at S's house. No Skinwalker activity. S continues her nightly ritual as usual, and by that time, S's mom brings a witch doctor to bless the house and performs a ritual to remove a ghost bone from S's brother, which, from what I gather, a ghost bone is some kind of a hex or a trap or something. The trap is a fetish that can be held dear to a manic spirit. It can be almost anything, like a toy doll or a cane, just something dear to a lost spirit, and then it attaches to a spirit bone to a target host. I guess that not only brought the attention of a ghost, but also of a damn Skinwalker. Once it was removed from him, things kind of calmed down. But this is where mentioning the school comes to play. Now, once I go north, at the T-bone intersection, I hit the highway. I have to cross the highway and head east to get to my place. That would mean I take a quick route in the dark dirt road or cut through an abandoned railroad dock onto another street that heads to my school. And from there, I cut through my school to my house. I decided I didn't want to walk in the darkness, and so cut through the lot, and as I got to the street that led to the school, I noticed this guy. He's heading towards me on a bike. He's very far away at the time, and I pay him no mind. As I get closer to him, I get further away from the only street light on the street. I notice a sense of eeriness about him. He gave me that similar feeling to the old man, how it just weirded me out. And I caught him staring at me, same wide-eyed look and blank face as the old man. Also, the way he was pedaling was so unnatural. He was moving at incredible speeds, almost seemed like he was moving 20 miles per hour. He covers the distance alarmingly fast and passes by me. Same damn thing as the old man. Literally cranes his head to keep staring at me and manages to move his bike along the curve of the road in a perfect manner, like it was almost natural to him or something. Thankfully, he kept on riding, and at this point I told myself to not be afraid at all, that if I had a tiny tinge of fear, he would most definitely come for me. I kept calm and walked to the school. Now you'd think the school was shut out by fences, but it was a very nice school that had no need to build large fences, so you could just walk past the small metal gates that are set up. It was mostly used to block cars and the like from getting past. No one really vandalized either, so another reason for no large fences. Once I get halfway through the school, I hear what sounds like a bike and cackling behind me. A feeling of dread sinks in. Shit. I whisper under my breath and glance back, but see nothing. I hurried my pace as all I had to go past was one large building and then clear a field and jump the only large chain link fence on the property. Just to give you a better perspective, the entrance I went through is a parking lot, and the path I took is somewhat of a path to allow small vehicles and maintenance trucks to get through, where buildings with different class strewn about from left to right. This small road winded through the whole school diagonally. Two large buildings occupied the east and west side of the lot. My trip usually meant I walked between the two large buildings, and I'd see the field, and from there my home neighborhood. I remained calm as I was nearing the end of the road and got between the two buildings. As you get to them, there is a large open area with tables and chairs to eat lunch, and it's not very well lit out there, and it can be pretty damn creepy at night, as trees and poles can block a clear view ahead. You had to get past that from this route. Regret soon followed me as I continued ahead. Should I just stayed the night at S's? I huffed out my breath, rasping, as I felt very nervous walking through the eating area. Then I heard tapping ahead, as if someone is tapping their knuckles or fingers on a pole. One tap, two tap. The fucker was toying with me. What the fuck do you want? I yelled out in anger and annoyance to the direction of the tapping. No response, just silence. It was too damn quiet. Then the most fucked up thing I ever heard in my life happens. Right behind my ear, I hear someone whisper, "Your skin," in the most horrid, raspy alien voice I ever heard. It was like a mixture between a child, a male, and a female voice. I freaked and noped the fuck out of there. I sprinted the fastest I've ever ran in my life, And thankfully, I had trained in parkour for a few months at the time, and had some decent acrobatic skills, enough to just climb and balance on fences and leap great distances. I leaped onto a table and ran, jumping from table to table, hearing tapping noises from behind getting closer and closer to me. Cackling was slowly getting louder and louder as I was getting to the passage between the two buildings. Once I got there, the noises stopped abruptly, but I didn't dare stop to turn back. I just kept going and got to the field, then made a mad dash to the only fucking tall fence this accursed school had. Just my luck, right? As I cleared the distance and near my destination, I climbed that damn fence faster than I had in my life. Right as I got to the top of the fence, I typically lift my whole body over and toss myself over with one hand on the top rail. But as I did that, something bit onto my wrist that was holding my weight. I yelped and lost my balance, making that fall a pretty bad one. That moment screwed up how my body was turned, and normally I bend at the knees to handle all the weight of my momentum, but when that happened, I lost concentration. It was a pretty long fall, I'd say 8 to 9 feet. I unfortunately landed very badly and put most of my weight on one leg. I slammed to the ground hard on my sides. Pain surged onto my right knee and the right side of my body. If it weren't for the adrenaline, I might have passed out from the pain. I lay there, curled up on the ground, just feeling it like it was over, and that I was surely dead. Then I took a look at the bite mark. It was odd because the bite felt very painful, but it wasn't that deep at all. 4 small slash marks on the underside of my wrist. I tore a piece of my shirt and wrapped on my wrist and limped back to my house. Thankfully, I gained the strength to walk to the streets ahead, where the rest of the trip was uneventful. I was amazed the damn thing didn't just leap over and ended my life just like that, since it could move at such incredible speeds. The story I had to make up to my parents was so much bullshit that even though they thought I told them the truth, they instead believed the lie. I can't really remember the lie, something along the lines of me being depressed and cutting myself and something like that. But what I can tell you from this experience is that I was left with the whole new perspective of otherworldly beings, and that some instance of their existence is true in some way. I was not only left with a mental scar, but a permanent injury to my leg. Torn ligaments had caused my knee to become what now I know as a degenerative knee, which means I have signs of arthritic joint. Well, fuck, man. Lessons learned. Don't take long walks at night, and always stay in the light. You never know what may be lurking in the dark. The Abandoned Monster. A close friend of mine used to explore abandoned houses back in high school. We found one on the grounds of an isolated limestone quarry and decided to check it out right after dusk. We started walking a lap around the house to look for a point of entry. The grass, the weeds around the house were almost to our waist, so we were very slow moving and very quiet. As we turned a corner around the back of the house, about 15 feet in front of us, something seemed to stand straight up from the grass, as if it had been laying, and pulled upright by string, or like a vampire from a movie. It was pretty dark. but I remember the figure as about 6 foot or more, with a large chest, blood red eyes, with an overall humanoid feel, despite the fact that it had antlers like a deer. My buddy was walking ahead by a step. He jumped back and grabbed my hand. We turned and ran, as whatever it was just stood there watching us leave, never made a noise. To this day, when I tell the story, I can tell people think I'm crazy, and rightly so. Mine and my father's Skinwalker experience. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We mostly deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo reservation, about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he's chilling with his Navajo friend, Travis, and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got family in Window Rock and that he hasn't seen them in ages, and suggests that they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was summertime, so Dad decided we'll all go down together. He can do his delivery really quick, and then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out the Window Rock. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded down with fright. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spent our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful, and we start heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in front, and Travis and his girlfriend in their trucks behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock trip, but this next part, I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway, there is nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right, there is a huge field, separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill, we see what happens to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey Trav, do you see that big ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That is not a dog, speed up right now and hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, hit it, you have to hit it, please hit that fucking thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a little bit closer, I can begin to see it a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliff, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us. And it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually fucking huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it is about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone screaming as their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it was gone from sight. Travis comes over the radio again. Holy shit. Keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster. We have to go faster. He keeps repeating the last part. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster. Pretty soon, we were speeding like crazy, and we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup. We get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, We just saw a Skinwalker a few miles back and it's been following us. The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. So yeah, I guess that's my Skinwalker story. Sorry for the length, but thank you for reading. If any one of you guys have had any experiences, I'd love to hear them. Anyone know this weird rolling creature? Well, I have a story about a pretty creepy thing that sometimes passes around 2 to 3 a.m. through the street in front of my house. The first and only time I saw it was summer of 2012. I was 14 at the time, and as school days were over, I decided to stay up all the time I could before falling asleep playing video games and watching online videos. I was in the living room. It was about 2 in the morning. I had gone through some gameplay videos, a few Pokemon battles, and 2 cans of soda when I heard this kind of engine sound, as if a motorcycle was speeding through my head. Soon, things started to shake, but it wasn't a physical movement, more like a weird sensation that everything was tumbling at the same time, and this sound came from outside, which made the neighborhood dogs go crazy. I was confused about what was happening, but also curious about the loud sounds going on so early. As I opened my window curtains, I could see my cousin, the eldest, coming from his late shift. My uncle and his family used to live at the house at the opposite corner of the intersection. After making sure he got inside safely, I looked in the direction where the sound was coming from. It was left from my window, following the road. Now this thing comes rolling or something at a considerable speed, and then just stops a few yards from my house, where I can still see it. I was astonished with the next thing I saw. This wheel thing began to unroll itself, like a roll of paper, until it was long enough to make a shape out of it. It was a bovine-looking thing, like an actual cow, but with no horns and a more pronounced dewlap, dull dark eyes, and the light-colored body, like one of those big trash bags when extended, but it wasn't as thin as those, neither as fat as a normal cow. It stopped there, then stood up like a dog, struggling to keep on its hind legs, just watching its surroundings for a minute or so, and then began to wrap itself up again and went rolling downhill. It was late, and I was tired enough to not think through this until it became nightmare feel, so I called it a night. Next day at my uncle's house, my cousin, his siblings, my sister, and I were telling horror stories, and he proceeded to tell us about the thing. How he also saw it while he prepared to go to bed, and that it wasn't the first time it happened to him. Has anybody else had an encounter or a sighting of this thing, or knows what it is? I'm really curious, as it didn't seem to be the kind of creature that murders or goes about destroying things. Four men chased by Skinwalker. I apologize in advance if my submission is not up to par. This is my first ever post and I'm new to Reddit. This story is also a little fuzzy around the details because it's not mine, rather was relayed to me after the fact by a group of friends. Okay, so here goes. One night, four friends, we'll call them JB, Matt, John, and Jesse, had took a late night trip out to the boonies to drink and get high without fear of being approached by cops. They had all rode together in John's truck. They parked, let the tailgate down, cracked open the ice chest, and were debating whether or not to start a bonfire. While the three attempted to get a fire going, JB had decided to give some girls they knew a call and invite them to the festivities. He was forced to walk off a few feet away from his pals to try and maintain a better signal, as well as to be able to hear over the shouting and laughter of his increasingly buzzed friends. He had found a good spot in a small clearing and was about to dial when he saw rustling in the nearby trees. Thinking nothing of it at first, he continued to dial. That is, until he heard what he could best describe as a blood-curdling shriek from the wooded area right beside him. He, of course, booked it the hell out of there in the direction of his friends. His friends, who had also heard the noise, were stunned and waiting for JB to offer an explanation for what that sound had come from. An explanation that came in the form of, I don't know, but we need to get the fuck out of here now. Matt and Jesse were curious as to what it was, but hesitant to leave. Luckily for the entire group though, John, who was the driver, is Navajo, and already had a pretty good idea what made the sound, and was making his way towards the truck, keys in hand, and yelling for the rest to come on. JB took no convincing, and was only a few steps behind, and made his way into the passenger seat. Matt and Jesse protested, but realized it was futile when the truck slowly began to take off without them. They quickly jumped into the back, and John floored it out the way they had come. Matt and Jesse gripped on tightly to the truck's bed rails so they didn't bounce over the side as John sped down the dirt road. Jesse was just gaining his balance, and Matt began to scream in terror and began frantically pointing towards the tree line they were rapidly passing. Jesse struggled for a moment to make out what was being pointed out to him, when suddenly it was clear. There was a figure chasing them, leaping from tree to tree, keeping pace with the truck at an incredible speed. In the darkness, there were no features that could be made out, other than it was a very large, human-like, and moved faster and jumped farther than any human possibly could. Jesse later said, had they been in a jungle, he would have believed there was some kind of giant primate stalking them through the woods. Both Matt and Jesse began shouting for John to floor it. He did, and less than a half a mile away, the tree line would end. But Matt and Jesse worried that once that creature reached the last tree, its last giant leap would land in the back of the truck with them. Fortunately, as they reached the last tree and could see lights of civilization, the thing had vanished as quickly as it had moved. The four continued to speed all the way to John's home and were extremely grateful that they had arrived in one piece. Once home, John explained that, even though he had purposely not looked behind to see what was following them, he believed it was a skinwalker. JB also did not see what had followed them through the trees because he unshamedly admitted to crouching in the passenger seat's floorboard and praying for safety the whole way home. Like I said, sorry for lack of details, as well as the non-climatic ending, but as far as I know, this is a completely true story. Hope you enjoyed. What I'm posting is a real experience. Okay, to start off, I suck at writing, but I feel that need to get these things off my chest. Like my username says, I'm from Vermont. Well, I grew up on the border of New York and Vermont, so front yard was in New York and backyard was in Vermont. This was like 23 years ago, and the road we lived on was very long and only 3 houses on a 2-mile stretch. My parents, my grandparents, and an old couple lived at the very end of the road. Golf Course Road was the name of the street. Okay, so we were surrounded by forest, like a lot of woods. I was always playing in the woods. When my cousins would spend the weekend, we would all go out and make forts and kid stuff like that, all over the place. Well, behind my grandparents' house used to be a tree farm from way back in the day. If anyone has ever been in a tree farm, it's kinda creepy because they're all in a row. So this tree farm area ends where the forest began. All the trees were pine trees, and some were very big. Now, where the forest and the tree farm meet was a cool place because the forest was so dense we couldn't ever get through or see through it. We had built a little camp in the very back. Now one day during the week, I remember I left some of my favorite toy trucks at this camp, so I decided I would just go get it. So I make this long ass walk all the way to the back. I get maybe 20 yards when I see all the thick bush from the forest start rustling. Not like a little rustle, but violently. Before I say anything else, I want to say that one of my cousins would be dropped off at my grandparents' house, and it was probably him trying to scare me. One of my cousins, David, was a fucking dickhole and always tried to scare the shit out of me. Okay, so I think it's David trying to scare me, so I yell, "David, fucking stop it." Now I can hear heavy breathing and branches breaking. Again, I yell for David to stop because now I'm getting really scared. Then something starts growling. Not like a bear or a dog, but almost robotic. I remember what happened next. What happened next made me shit my pants. I said something like, "Okay, now stop it, Dave." Something said, "Stop, Dave," in a really shaky robotic voice. Just then, I saw it walk out from the trees. Long, lanky limbs and no fur. Its face was like a dog, very long. I ran, shitting my pants and all. I ran faster than ever. When I got out in the open, I saw my grandparents bringing the groceries from the house. I ran up to their porch, into the house crying like crazy. The next hour or some is kind of hazy to me. I remember them asking me what happened, and I kept saying Dave scared me. Well, my grandmother calls my Uncle Ron and tells him something in the woods scared me, and she wants him to check it out, thinking maybe it's a mountain lion or something. This is what makes it all worse. My uncle comes back. He says he found 2 small female deer ripped apart out in the forest behind the pine trees farm. After that, we moved to Tennessee, and I never played in the woods again. Now, I wrote this experience because it really happened. I lived on the border of New York and Vermont by a town called Whitehall. It was not Bigfoot I saw. Also, there are some people on Reddit I would like to get in touch with because their stories sound like the real thing. Any questions or whatnot, please ask. I'm not holding back anything.